no respect.
It's not a roast, right?
The water balloons are getting ready though.
Look, years ago, Susan and I were having some issues, but I didn't know we were having issues because I just didn't know. Because I was stupid. And so she went and talked to my beloved pastor. And he said, if you don't do something, she's going. And I said, what? Shock to me. And so we prayed. And so what happened next? Pat shows up at church. This is Pat. Stand up, Pat. You can blame him for being involved all this time. He says, hey, I heard there's something for vets at the 700 Club. And I said, oh yeah? So we went there. It was a real eye-opener. I said, yeah, they were talking about me, but they were really talking about Pat. And we came home, and it was horrible. I cried all the way home. I mean, it was bad. Because in them days, nobody knew anything about what you were dealing with. They did, but didn't want to share it, apparently. So we got home, and Susan and I went again, because that very first year they had two, not one, two conferences. So we went to that, came home, and another guy that was there with us, oh, we got to do this and start a point man group. So Pat and I said, oh yeah, that might be a good idea. But this other guy was hot to go, but he didn't want to do it, all right? So eventually Pat sent in the paperwork. I told him I would help him, but I didn't want to do nothing. Next thing you know, Chuck Dean had quit and nobody knew it, and he wasn't the head point man for 3 years. And another guy named Curtis Wright became the head point man for a couple months. His house burned down, and all the point man records, except for a few boxes I have at home, were destroyed in the fire. And then Del Watlin became the president, and he had some issues from being shot through the neck and the quadriplegic and stuff, and he had spinal cord injuries that were really bad. And so he managed to do it for several years. Well, in the meanwhile, he said, boy, I'm thinking about doing this or that. And I said, well, what do they do? And he said, well, this is what they do. And I said, so I do the work. Anybody can do that. So I started doing other things in point man. And then in 1999, well, if I actually go back a little bit, in the 90s, we had a meeting in Topeka, Kansas, and we were hosted by a gracious couple and their friends. And we met at their church, and we met at their home. We stayed at their home. They were able to accommodate Del. Then after that, we traveled with them a couple times and went through all the New England states. And he had some issues there. Almost drove off a cliff because he insisted on driving. Remember, his arms and legs don't work.
Yeah.
And they didn't have really good hand controls. They had like a lever for the brake, but he had spasms. And he'd flailing his arms around, and I'd have to hold them up and then grab the wheels so they wouldn't crash into the wheel. It was a great ride. Backed off a cliff.
I would be saying, Del, you're getting close. You're getting close.
Put on the brake.
Hey, driver, we're getting close.
And so that all went by, and we visited a lot of churches and helped start some outposts and stuff, and then in 1999, he couldn't do it anymore. And so there was a meeting, I believe, in Kansas again, and I wasn't at that meeting. And an individual jumped up and said, "I'll take that job," but it wasn't me, and he wasn't speaking for me. And nobody said that's a good idea. So then I got a call, and he says, I've been praying about this, and I think God wants you to do it. And I said, well, I don't know about that. But so I prayed, and I got together with Pastor Fred, and he encouraged me to do it, and off we went. And for the last 20 years, I've been head of PMIM. And a lot has happened.
Oh, yeah.
It's, we were involved in writing an amicus brief to the Supreme Court. Okay, didn't know that, I suppose, but somebody knew. And it had to do with the Ferris doctrine, and you can check all that stuff out online. But they said we didn't have standing, and the case that was involved was a fellow that was in the Air Force, active duty Air Force, and he had something wrong with his throat, so he had to do tracheotomy, but not a nurse, what's like the next nurse down, the
Nurse
nurse
practitioner.
changers, what do they call it?
Nurse practitioner.
LPN? No, that's a license. Whatever.
A PA.
Not one that's qualified to give you a trach,
Oh.
okay? And they did it in the kids ward. And so they got the stuff for kids to do it, but they didn't have the adult sizes. So the nurse, after the trach, took and wheeled them into another room. And he choked to death because no one checked him.
Wow.
And he vomited and choked out. And so we got some bunch of lawyers in Texas called me up and said, would you be interested in working with this college that they were part of, some law school, to go on this? And I said, sure. And that went on for quite a while. I had no idea that if you file a brief at the Supreme Court, you have to print 40 copies of the brief in a certain font and a certain number of words per page. All kinds of stuff. And it cost 20 grand to file it. So they paid for that. We didn't do that. But it was our information about what we do, and PTSD and stuff that went into that. So it was something that, who would have thought we'd even be involved in that? When, it's some months before, years before, you're thinking about pulling snot out of somebody because you didn't like the way they looked, Who knew? But we've attended tons and tons of conferences and outpost meetings and been all over the place. Susan spent a lot of time talking to other women on the phone. They call up and they'd want information, and I wasn't the person to give it to them. But she was an expert from dealing with this stuff all these years. And she talked to this one guy's wife for a long time. And then the next thing you know, I'm talking to him. And then the next thing you know, he shows up at one of our meetings. And next thing you know, he said, I might like to do this. And I said, I kept that in the back of my head. And after a while, we said, well, yeah, that's a good idea. And so that's how we got to this guy.
He just showed up on our porch.
It's it.
At my porch. And he's a good guy.
But we spent a lot of time back and forth and together, and I've spent a ton of time with Marcus, back and forth and together, and Marcus and Stephanie have been to our house a lot of times. Their son is gonna be 18. First time we saw him, he was what, 6? He had a birthday party for him at our house. It was fun. So that's all I got to say. What did I forget to say?
Oh, no,
You had that look.
I was trying to get this.
I'm like the worst.
This don't look good.
That's what I was thinking too.
Okay. I have something to say as long as.
Tim,
That's
what?
what you were saying, but I wasn't sure. All right.
All right, here we go.
I have something to say, but we can't put it on the internet. Or.
Oh, well.
All right, wait a minute, shut off the camera.
Shut off your camera.